Good evening, everyone. I call this meeting of the New Shoreham Town Council to order. Today is Tuesday, September 3rd, 2024. It is 6:30 p.m. The first item is will be taken up in closed session and involves the potential acquisition of real property. Can I have a motion to go into closed session?
I'll make a motion to go into closed
I
session.
have a second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
All right.
Opposed, no. Guys have it. We're in closed. Call this meeting of the New Shoreham Town Council to order, back to order. We did have a closed session. No votes were taken. Can I have a motion to seal the minutes?
Motion to seal the minutes.
All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Is there any public comment tonight, Sandra?
Thank you, David. Sandra Kelly, Mohegan Trail. I just came to invite you and the community to our Alzheimer's walk on Sunday. Registration is between 11 and 12, and the kickoff walk is around 12:15 or so. So
Thank you.
if any of you can join us, we would appreciate it.
Susan and I will be there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? And the second one. Item 3, our consent agenda. I just would, we have some minutes to approve, but I would also just point out, while we have in public comment, heard, about noise, this letter that we received in correspondence, seemed to indicate that there may be some information out there that we are contemplating some action, which is there really is nothing on the table right now. And I just thought it was important to mention that. Because someone could go on to Clerkbase, click through and say, what are they considering? What are they doing? And not. I will. It came to our attention that your committee, it didn't go to the entire council. It came to me and to Mary Ann. It came to our attention that your committee is being pressured to shut down outdoor entertainment because neighbors are complaining. We're serious regulars on Sunday nights, etc. As I said, we do hear testimony occasionally, and are always open to conversation, but there is nothing on our agenda about that. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Opposed, no. Item 4, discuss appointment of the interim town manager. So I did a brief update that I really wanted to start by saying none of what the council's been working on for its last couple of meetings would be possible without Mary Ann's professional approach and the ongoing love that she has for this island and its community. So I wanted to say thank you at the outset for that. We've had 2, I believe, closed session meetings to discuss a candidate for interim town manager. I think it's fair to say that the council has reached consensus and is excited. We do have a special meeting scheduled for next week. And at that meeting, we'll walk the community through our thinking and the approach that Amy Land and Millie McGinnis have suggested to us. I'm very much looking forward to that conversation. As I said, I mean, I don't want to speak for anybody at the table, but I think after our last session talking to the candidates, I think people are excited about the next step. Have I missed anything? I didn't think I'd be happy to. I just don't want to go beyond what was suggested to us. I'm happy to do it, but I was under the impression that we needed to make sure that the community was aware that we were going to do, you know, a deeper dive at our meeting next week. Would you like me to?
Well, I think we want to make sure that any of the public that wants to
Okay.
be here should be here,
That's
right?
great.
So
I'm being,
I think we have a great proposal
yes.
for
Uh,
the interim situation.
So the consensus, if I can call it that, is around the appointment of Amy Land as interim town manager and Millie McGinnis as interim chief administrative officer. This is all, can all be contemplated, by the way, for those who would be appropriately interested and concerned within the existing budget. The idea would be that Amy would be interim town manager, and we would appoint, how's this work exactly, Amy? Mona Helterline as the interim finance director. We would appoint Millie as chief administrative officer. We would appoint Laurel Payne as an additional deputy town clerk. So I think accomplishing a lot of, you know, I think what we long for when these openings occur, which is filling them with long-term trusted local experts. So
There's just one bit of information that I want to throw out there because I have found people are unaware of this. I guess it's been a lot longer than I realized. The question was having 2 deputy town clerks. And as far back as the 70s and 80s for sure, we had 2 deputy town clerks on board all the time. So this is not that particular piece of this, which people seem to be gnawing at, is not without precedent. And I was kind of a little surprised to realize we only had 1. Billy, were you and Molly both deputies?
At the same time now.
I have no idea when that ended.
comments, thoughts, etc. What day is it?
Monday the 9th.
Monday
at
the 9th
3:00.
at 3:00. So, terrific. Thank you. Amy, you're up. Receive data, discuss and act on property tax exemptions updates for seniors, veterans, and homestead.
Just so I can see all of you at once. And I did give you a fair amount of material across the 3 different exemptions. That's because each one is unique in its enabling legislation and then how it's actually structured and what we may want to do with it. But obviously, in looking at moving to the next stage of homestead, it became appropriate to start to look at the other town exemptions. So I think senior is listed first on the agenda.
Yes,
Is that correct?
goes seniors, veterans, then homestead.
Great. So just a quick introduction to the senior exemption, which is actually structured as a tax abatement as opposed to an exemption. And the tax abatement is equal to 60% of the total tax on the property or a maximum of $600. And it's been that way since 2012. The criteria is fairly rigid. We have 9 accounts that qualify, And that is that it be residential property, age 65 or older, or fully disabled. We refer to it as the senior exemption, but there is also a component for those who are fully disabled. The applicant needs to be the owner occupant. You need to be a resident for 5 years prior to qualifying, and household income cannot exceed $40,000, which also has not been changed since 2012. And then finally, it is an annual application, which is due by December 1st. So that's something we'll talk about relative to timing if the council were interested in making changes.
You- Well, I'm assuming something that I probably shouldn't be.
Sure.
That you would like these things aligned on the calendar, or do you know, like, what's the preference of the finance department on something?
Not necessarily, actually.
Okay,
It is typical to have your senior exemptions prior to the certification of the role,
mhm,
especially since our provisions require that 5-year residency prior.
right.
Homestead, we would like to have your application period January 1st, say to March 15th, because you want it to be you want people to be attesting as of what happened on December 31st.
Right.
It doesn't have that 5-year look back period,
I see.
but you also want it done before the certification of the role. So we do want different windows. And then when we get to veterans, it's actually a one-time application. So that doesn't need to be renewed annually. So the timing is okay. I wouldn't necessarily change it for the seniors. It's just if we are going to have an ordinance change effective next tax year, we're on a little bit of a tight time frame for this one in particular.
What would you describe as the most significant moving pieces here? There's the household income.
It's the household income and
maximum,
the abatement amount.
but not the 5-year look back.
It's in the purview of the council,
I'm-
but
I
it's
mean,
not
we're just talking.
necessarily something that it has been a trigger point or an issue.
Uh-huh.
I will say for all of these exemptions, because the council is starting to look at it, the Board of Assessors is also going to meet on Friday
Mhm.
to look at them with their own eyes so that they have an opportunity to bring forward any.
It would be really
recommendations
helpful
as
to get
well.
their sense of this.
Yep.
They live it.
But it's really that income level and the abatement amount. Looking at other communities, income levels are higher. Some communities don't have any income requirements, and the abatement amounts are also all over the board. So it's not as though there's a singular model across the
Gotcha.
state. It's really what we want to be doing, and whether it's time to modernize this particular statute a little bit.
So you must have some idea though of a new threshold, right?
So
Even like cost of living increases and.
right, if you run some very back of the envelope CPI numbers, from 2012 forward, you'd wind up at an income threshold of about 55,000 and an abatement amount of about 850 ballpark. As an example, Marianne did ask the question, what do other communities do?
Yeah.
And there's not a consistent answer
Right.
to that. The state has not put out an updated exemption summary
Mhm.
since 2001. That's the last time they did a comparison across the state.
That's pretty funny. It's 23 years among friends.
I mean, I would imagine with
Sorry,
this,
I said 2001, 2021.
Oh.
Sorry.
but with this income level, we're primarily talking about people who are in a generational house and have been there a long time, right? Not necessarily somebody who just bought the house, obviously.
Yes. Yeah, and if you look at the handful, the 9 accounts that we do have, that's really what you're looking for. You're looking at a fixed income, a house that's been with these individuals for quite some time. Generally, these applicants are almost always going to also qualify for the homestead exemption. So that's an additional relief that we've been able to provide to them. I don't think the town at this point wants to open the doors a lot wider to a much broader population. But I'm not sure we're fully capturing our entire target audience at this point.
Bill.
Is that target audience, do you believe, because of the income primarily level? And you said there's nine people qualify now?
9 accounts qualify, yep.
What is that? 9 that qualify or 9 that have applied and qualified.
We,
Because you can't tell what somebody's income is. You don't know unless they've applied.
right, so these are the ones that have applied and qualified.
Yeah, thank you.
I can't say who might qualify, who does not
So
apply.
Right.
if my math is right, you could have a husband and wife each drawing social security whose income would exceed 40,000.
Exactly, exactly.
Right?
And
So-
so it's always been, did you, I'm sorry, Molly, but going
No, it's
back,
okay.
I remember when this happened, but I do not remember why one was an abatement and one was an exemption, except the exemption had always existed. And the abatement was added. Did you go far enough back in the research to find it, or was there any kind of record?
It was established, I believe, in 1981, but I
Yeah.
didn't get any of the
And they
why.
use an
Abacuses.
abatement as it might be as simple as we call it an abatement because that's what the statute says. It's called an
I-
abatement. statute.
There was a lot of I was involved in it, but I don't,
Yeah.
it was so long ago, I don't remember it. And it was incredibly complicated and convoluted because we made it so that way.
I think,
But it seems like we had $3,200 abatement allowance then, which may be completely off base, but
if you're looking for direct tax relief, you're going to naturally go to a tax abatement as opposed to an exemption.
Yeah.
It's generally considered more direct.
Right.
A lot of communities are structured that way on this senior side.
Go ahead, Bill.
Senior advisor committee, I know they had to talk about this, did they present any number or all?
I don't think they did. Honestly, because I'm so young, I had not really spent a great deal of time thinking about this until actually Amy at one of our more recent meetings said, we need to look at these things, as we're going through an approach over the next however months around property taxes generally. And the number that stood out to me is the 40,000 number because I know for my parents, I know what their social security check is.
And, if the council wants to move forward at looking at some of these elements, we can bring back recommendations. But I didn't want to charge too far down the path if people were not interested in
I don't know,
modifying.
how do people feel about it?
I have 2 more questions. One is, do you have people apply that get denied?
I don't have a good answer for that, so I'll speak to the Board of Assessors. They may get a lot of questions on the street
Hmm.
and provide the answer, and someone then doesn't apply because they don't qualify.
Okay.
So
And then
let
my
me
other
talk to them
question would
about it.
be, do we think there are people out there who didn't apply, but maybe don't know about it and that's why they didn't apply? Like, there might be some people who qualify but aren't aware of it. Do you think that's a possibility?
It, I believe, is on the back of the tax bill. That's something that we can work on, is making sure that we have everyone. Because once you start the program, you tend to renew every year. You generally don't qualify one year and then not qualify the next. Once we get somebody in the door, they tend to stay with the program for quite some time or as long as they can. So, but we can definitely do some outreach and make sure that we have reached everyone that could potentially qualify.
I mean, I think we should look into it more, certainly about raising the amount because I mean, it's still pretty low.
Do you have the ability, Amy, when you, if we're going through numbers and scenarios to have a sense of who would be captured, in other words, sort of trying on the budget side to sort of calculate what's the impact? I mean, right now it's $5,400, right?
Right, that's going to be really challenging with
Yeah.
the income limits.
I
It's
would-
not
I would
information
think.
we otherwise have
Yeah.
access to.
Right. Right. I would appreciate ideas and recommendations. Assume others would as
Yeah,
well.
I could concur with that as well, especially from the board. since this would
Yeah.
be-
There was a reason, I will not remember it, and I'm tired of this research, but it was a reason, it was an abatement in that extension. I'm sorry, I can't remember anything more than it was a reason.
Not to be honest, like.
No, please.
Because I looked at this when one was online. and you
Yeah.
have to put down your pension, income, all these things. When I looked at it, I said, would it make more sense that if your taxes, you know, your adjusted gross income, something like that would be easier, and it's less that you have to provide to the town.
Yeah,
It's simple. you know,
that's a really good idea.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah, making it simpler, I would think that's a good idea.
The other comment I would make is as we think about the exemptions, somebody asked about consistency across them.
Yeah,
I will remind you that the residency under this section is 10 months. Over on the homestead side, we have 12 months. That is probably something we might want to align going forward. We may talk about it and decide, no, it's appropriate to keep them different, but that is a definite discrepancy between the two.
it's helpful.
And just to give a little bit of barometer here, under Rhode Island general laws on personal income tax, they also have another exemption for property, for your income tax. Similar. And the income level, I'm just looking at it, is lower than the 40, which kind of surprises me. I haven't looked at it. It's like 37,870, similar, 65 years old or disabled. And it's $650.
Gotcha.
So there's another opportunity for folks out there with it when they're filing their income
I'm
tax.
creeping up there. I'm on my way.
Since you have that up, Marion, is that individual or household?
Property tax would be household. It does say household.
Thanks.
You want to go to veterans?
Yeah,
Are there any other
that's-
questions on the senior? We're gonna get some sense from the Board of Assessors and from the Finance Department about this.
You might even be able to get information from Department of Human Services, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we'll certainly talk to them
Good
about the
thought.
outreach side. So. Veterans is a little different. So that is structured as a tax exemption. The qualifying criteria are set forth in Rhode Island general law, so that is not something that we control locally. The value of the exemption currently is $170,356, so this is taken off your assessed value. And it was last changed in 2013. We have 60 accounts that qualify for a total tax value exempted of just over $10 million and 56,500 in tax dollars that are abated. So a more robust program, definitely. This one is a little less discretionary. In the reading of the state statutes, we really need to be adjusting this relative to the last revaluation. So I think this is an exercise we sort of have to go through.
Okay.
There's not as much decision-making for the council at this point, just to let you know that it's coming, to let everybody else know that it's coming.
What's that gonna look like?
I haven't done the math. But we'll do that and put it forward. If you look at the history, though, again, one question Marianne was curious about was around how it has come down in some years. And there were some times where the entire grand list in a statistical actually did go down. But really, more often what that's telling you is that because this is an exemption off the tax assessment, it means that the grand list is growing at a rate that's faster than the mill rate. Because the
Right.
statute says the exemption needs to be recalculated in a way, excuse me, that the tax benefit stays the same. Does that make sense from
Yep.
a math perspective? So that 70 will, 173.56 will be recalculated to provide the same tax benefit that existed previously.
Right.
That one's a little more straightforward. Anything you would add, Marion?
Time that the town revisits. Make the necessary adjustments.
In the past, the Legion is really on top of this. So.
It becomes less of a hot button issue when that exemption actually does decrease. And that's been the pattern. You can see it on the history down below. And I think over at least several of the last 10 years, you would have seen that similar pattern.
A decrease in the gross amount.
A
because of-
decrease in
because
the
of value
assessment
of the
amount,
property.
but maintaining the consistency on the tax benefit side.
And so this is enabled by the state,
Mhm.
but we determine the specifics of it?
We
Or-
determine the amount. Yep.
Okay.
So I would say we initially determined the amount. So there was enabling legislation at the state level that for New Shoreham set the exemption at 34,670 or something around there. And so we set the initial amount through that enabling legislation and then have the responsibility for keeping up with it since then.
So I imagine you would have a recommendation on this as
Yeah,
well,
so
right?
we'll bring one forward for that.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
Terrific, thank you.
And as I said earlier, that's a one-time application. So you file your papers, your discharge papers with the town, and then that will run with you for the rest of your tenure. And it does extend to widows as well. So on to the more complex questions of the day, which is the homestead. As a reminder, last spring, when we talked about this, we focused first on the homestead exemption in a very narrow set of criteria for residents, owner occupied at a 20% rate. And I've given you a little bit of the data there. 235 qualifying accounts. We exempted $53 million in assessed value for a tax benefit of $293,000. And that impact to the non-exempt taxpayers, you know, we don't just want to focus on the benefit of the exemption, but how it affects the rest of the population as well, was an increase of about 2.2% to balance off that exemption amount. And the question really for the council today is whether you want to continue with some of the next steps that we had previously discussed. And that really focused on including mixed use properties and including residents who were not the owners, who had some sort of long-term lease, but qualified as residents under the statute that we had set forth. If those two things are still a priority for the council, it actually starts to shift. You'll remember from a homestead exemption to a differential tax rate, where you have a tax rate for residents, resident occupied properties, and you have a tax rate for non-resident owner occupied properties. That is obviously a much more complex process, which is why we wanted to regroup and really check in with the council and see how we want to proceed.
Thoughts? Well, part of the reason that I think we decided to do a sunset was to do something that was, shall we say, more refined. Right? So I would like to look at all that stuff, including whether the statute that was passed provides us with the authority that we need to be as nuanced as we want to be. And I think we have to do that this fall, so that if we decide that there's a direction we want to go in philosophically, I don't want to waste a lot of the councils and staff and, you know, members of the community's time until we're certain that we have the statutory authority that we need to do those things. So I would say focusing on that sooner rather than later would be very helpful. By the way, I have no idea what that looks like. I just know that, I know that, the homestead exemption is a bit of a blunt instrument, shall we say. Doesn't make it bad, just.
And also, I agree with you there, Keith. And then also looking a little bit more into what Amy said on the rentals, and that would be obviously for those units that are year round.
Okay.
The mixed use is a little more complicated.
The mixed use is going to be complicated on the assessing side,
Mhm.
honestly, because we don't currently break down line items in terms of use of mixed use properties. But that's a natural next step in how most communities approach it.
The one that sticks out to me, this is not picking on them, it's actually praising them. The grocery store, I think, does a very good job of trying to provide year-round housing for year-round workers. But because it is a commercial property, that part of their square footage is not, I don't even know if that's the way you calculate it, but it, you know, is not eligible for homestead. And if we want to encourage businesses that are year-round to provide year-round housing, then, you know, we ought to look at whether there are tools that we could have that would, I don't know, maybe the ferry does, but it's just, it's an interesting thought.
I agree. I think it's a really important piece of our community support.
Yeah.
And I do think it would be important, obviously 513, if you know, you may be someone who lives off island, but you have a 513 on your property and you have a year-round tenant,
Mhm.
you should be included in this for whatever portion of it is appropriate. Obviously, it's a portion, right? But I do think when we get down to discussing this, we're gonna have to have a lot of the same parameters, right? Like the tenant is the one that would have to show that they live here and vote here. And that would have to be part of the application, I would think, right? Like,
Yes.
whereas that is something we required of the homestead exemption for the owner occupied dwelling this year. I just want to make sure that we're distinguishing between a year-round lease where somebody pays year-round but only lives in it in the summer, and a year-round lease where someone lives there. Because both of those things exist.
Yes.
Yeah, so in the other communities that have defined this, they set that definition of resident and resident occupied. And that applies whether you are the owner or the tenant, and there's a section that defines what criteria is allowable for a tenant.
Mhm.
You know, usually it is providing a copy of at least a 1-year lease, if not a multi-year lease. But they have to meet that exact same criteria of residency that we set forth. So.
So I don't know what you need from us, but I think you have a sense that this is something that, from the council's perspective, is worth spending time.
Yeah, so we're going to start on 2 paths concurrently. One is the language around the ordinance, around residents and non-residents and establishing those tax rates. And the second is to confer with the attorneys about whether or not
Right.
they think we need to go back through the
And
legislature.
I would include Rick and
Rick,
Jeff in
yeah.
the conversation as well.
That obviously
Sorry.
puts the
I'm
timing.
master of the obvious there.
It puts the timing in a very different place if we do require enabling legislation. So.
Yeah.
And then, so I think it's great to go forward with that second piece, but so now that you've gone through this first application process with the new piece, are there suggestions that you would make to altering it? To altering this existing piece?
So there are some, they're not substantive process changes, but there are some dates in the existing ordinance that if we did nothing else, those dates need to be updated. So that's
Sure.
if we did nothing else, even before the sunset, we probably wanna update
Mhm.
that. The other, and again, the Board of Assessors is going to talk a little bit more about this, is really on their review of applications and creating in the next round of an ordinance, a more direct and clear channel for appeals. We had a handful of denied applications and we found the language wasn't quite robust
Oh.
enough for everyone to feel really good about the due process.
Sure.
So we just want to be more direct about that. It worked out just fine. And that was at, I think, 5 out of a total of 240 that were roughly denied. So the percentages were good, but we want to do that part even better.
Terrific. Thank you. Any other questions for Amy?
So just the same question on this. Do you have any feeling that there may have been people who could have applied and didn't?
I
That may
really
have
don't
qualified and maybe for some reason didn't know about it, or?
I don't think so on this one. I'm sure there were a few, but when we talked about those initial numbers, we sort of said there might be a maximum of 400 and all of our estimates were run at 250. So to get 235, I felt like that without knowing any individual circumstance, I feel like those numbers were pretty close to what we were hoping. I think we'll obviously get more. You know, the one thing about this is the homestead as we've written it is an annual application. Anyone's circumstances may be different from one year to the next. They may qualify and then not qualify or vice
Right.
versa. So
Great.
one of the other actual comments that I know is going to come from the board is more clarity around someone who may be absent during those 12 months for medical reasons. That was one of the caveats that they wanted to make sure was, again, more explicit. So.
Right. Any other questions? Anything else, Amy?
No,
No?
thank you.
Terrific. Thank you. Item 6, you'll note little a, establish a public safety complex building committee. This project is at a point where I think it's important. I know the town manager thinks it's important to establish a formal building committee a la, you know, what we have with school, and, you know, it's gotta include a range of people from public safety to townspeople to finance, to, you know, there's a whole range of things. So I'm calling it out because at our next full meeting, I want to make sure we're that the fire department is comfortable. You know, there's a whole bunch of work that needs to be done, but I want to flag the fact that you know, we did get a federal appropriation. There's a lot of discussion going on around other grants that might be available, private fundraising, et cetera. You know, it's at a point where clearly it has been, but it is becoming a formal town priority, and it requires that sort of regular attention from a broad range of people. So that'll be next time. And I don't know whether anybody has any, you know, there's nothing of substance there, but just if you think of people, or if you think of, you know, people who ought to be involved, et cetera, please don't hesitate to, you know, let folks know. We still have under B, a police advisory commission opening for a term expiring December of 2029. We do have someone who has expressed interest in the Conservation Commission. It's Carlos Salinas. I'm sure all of you know him. He's been a very active and engaged guy on a range of things. Yes,
May I ask you just to, you can go back to the police advisory?
yes.
And make the appropriate for Carol if you.
Oh, I didn't have that on my clerk base.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right, I had emailed you that separately.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's my,
Sorry about that.
she's been serving and she would like to continue to serve for another 5-year term.
And this is Carolyn Collins?
Carol.
Okay.
Yeah, if you
Oh,
remember with this group, it was 5 years,
yes,
one year,
yes,
2 years,
yes,
so.
yes,
Thank
Yes,
you.
yes. I would make a motion to reappoint Carolyn Collins to the Police Advisory Commission with a term expiring 12/2029. Is
So,
there a second? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Hi.
Opposed, no. Sorry about that, Millie. Conservation Commission. This has been on for long enough. And Carlos is the only person who has expressed interest.
make the motion to appoint Carlos.
Second.
All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. I know. Vacancies, Commission on Motor Vehicles for Hire, one who doesn't hold a motor vehicles for hire license. And then sewer and water. And you hear me every meeting about that. That's a really important one, given the amount of change that's likely to occur, the amount of money that's invested, et cetera. So please, if you're looking for an interesting place to have an impact, those are good places. Can I have a motion to adjourn? All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it.